Well, hello and a very warm welcome to yet another edition of World Panorama, where we take a look at some of the most impactful news stories from across the globe. I'm your host, Frank Periera. Before we get to the detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories of the week. Sheikh Hasina's government takes charge in Bangladesh amidst rising demands for a legitimate election. US breaks free of the spell of Arctic weather. Nation gets down to calculating the economic costs of the polar vortex. Fighting escalates in South Sudan as government forces mount offensive. US expresses fears that the nation is heading towards collapse. And world pays tributes to braveheart Pakistani boy who was killed while stopping a suicide bomber outside his school. Well, let's begin with our top story of the week. Of course, amid a raging political crisis in Bangladesh, a new government has taken charge. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and her chief opposition rival Khaleda Zia are still locked in confrontation. Critics have condemned the election as a farce, while there's widespread fear that the new assembly could be short-lived. Both the UN and the US are leading world opinion in questioning the mandate. They are asking Sheikh Hasina to negotiate with her political rival Khaleda Zia and call for a repoll that will pave way for a more credible electoral verdict. Here's more.
The newly elected lawmakers may have taken oath, but Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina still continues to be under pressure to call a repoll. Boycotted by the opposition, the elections saw the ruling Awami League win 232 of the 300 seats, amid some of the deadliest violence in Bangladesh's electoral history. The unrest affected even the minority groups. Homes of Hindu residents were allegedly set ablaze in the villages of Jessore district. At least 200 polling stations were set on fire. Over 30 people died in post-poll clashes. As many as 153 members were elected unopposed, prompting Bangladesh Nationalist Party chief Khaleda Zia and many others to call the vote a farce.
কিন্তু পত্রিকায় দেখা যাচ্ছে মানে জাল ভোট ছিল অনেক ঢাকার আসনগুলোতে অনেক জাল ভোট ছিল নিহতের সংখ্যা ছিল অনেক মানে আমার কাছে গ্রহণযোগ্য হয় নাই
মানে নির্বাচনটা সুষ্ঠু হওয়ার কথা ছিল সুষ্ঠু হয় নাই যে পরিমাণ মানে ভোটার হওয়ার কথা ছিল সেই পরিমাণ ভোট হয় মানে ভোটার সংখ্যা হয় নাই গা
Zia wants the election declared null and void and a fresh poll held by a neutral caretaker government. Demands the government has refused.
It doesn't mean that there will be a question of legitimacy or anything, no. People participated in the poll and other political parties, they participated.
Many opposition activists are behind bars, while roads, rail and waterways remained partially shut. Reports said the government put Khaleda Zia under house arrest.
She's not at all house arrest. Many ambassadors like US ambassador, EU and many other countries, they visited her. Even many journalists went to her house.
The UN urged the two parties to resume a meaningful dialogue, while the US called for a vote that would credibly express the will of the people.
If we are looking at the stalemate that we are in and the way that the build up to the election, the election has not really at all in any manner resolved that problem. The stalemate remains where it is, which means whether or not the government goes ahead with the formation of the new government and the new parliament, the opposition will continue to demand the resignation of the new government.
Sheikh Hasina has signalled a willingness to start a dialogue, but on her own terms.
I hesitate to call it even an election. What we have seen is basically a power game between the two sides, and an extremely intolerant and violent manifestation of this zero-sum game of politics.
It's a stalemate the elections haven't resolved. Sheikh Hasina wants Khaleda Zia to sever ties with the fundamentalist Jamaat-e-Islami and strike a deal on fresh elections, a demand that Zia has consistently turned down.
Well, joining me on the show, of course, to add perspective on this particular subject matter is former Indian ambassador to Bangladesh, Mr. Dev Mukherjee. Mr. Mukherjee, welcome to the show. And of course, we took a look at that particular report and saw the aspects as far as the polls are concerned. But what do you believe, since you've been in Bangladesh a lot, you've seen everything on the ground there, do you believe that the victory of Sheikh Hasina was a legitimate one?
I think we need to be quite clear that the elections were within the four corners of the Constitution and the law. In fact, not holding the elections would have gone against the Constitution and the law, and there would have been a vacuum. But obviously, at the same time, when you have an election where a major party has not participated, then it brings into question not the legitimacy, but the acceptability of the results, because obviously in a democracy you would like the widest possible participation. But let me point out here that this is not unique. Even in India's Punjab, there have been elections which have been boycotted by some political parties. So legitimacy is not in question. Now, obviously this is not a situation with which anybody is happy. And the report mentioned about what the international community has said. I would like to point out that the real criticism has really come only from the United States. If you take the statements of the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, the Secretary General of the United Nations, they have very strongly emphasized that the way forward cannot be through political violence.
On that note, do you see the international community intervening with what's happening in Bangladesh or with what has already happened in Bangladesh?
I don't see the international community intervening at all. If one notices what has emanated from the government, from the Awami League, including the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, that they are not happy with this non-participation. They would like to have dialogue with the opposition with a view to see the way forward. What is implied here is a further election perhaps before the full term of 5 years. Now, when one talks of further elections, Mr. Periera, clearly elections cannot be for the sake of elections unless there is a productive dialogue so that all parties agree on what is to be done next. Having another election in itself serves no purpose. You are simply back to square one. So
on that note, how long do you see this government being in power or functioning? Do you see them completing their entire term?
I think they can complete their entire term, but I think they would probably wish to call for fresh elections if they are able to arrive at a conclusion after discussions with the opposition.
Okay,
this is my anticipation.
We spoke, of course, about the Bangladesh Nationalist Party not participating in these polls, and some of its allies also not participating in these polls. They came out and said that a free and fair election is not possible under Sheikh Hasina and her party. Was it a case of sour grapes and the opposition parties really knowing that they're not going to do too well, and that's why they boycotted the polls?
Actually, there are two issues here. I mean, may I
expound
on this a little bit? You see, according to all indicators, at least 3 months ago, the BNP was ahead of the Awami League and were expected to do well in the elections. So there is a question which I think is still unanswered as to why the BNP became rather obdurate in its approach to the elections. One possibility could be that they did not wish to be in charge while the war crimes trial came to a conclusion, because their own people are involved and of course many people from the Jamaat. So perhaps they would like this issue to be closed before they really take on the responsibility of government. That is one question. The other thing here, that when we talk of a government led by Sheikh Hasina conducting the elections, the government had offered a national government, including the BNP. and if I mistake not, even the Home Ministry had been offered to them. So it is not that the government said that this would be an election solely under the Awami League. Yes, Sheikh Hasina, as the elected Prime Minister, would remain Prime Minister, but all the other members could come from any of the parties in Parliament. That was rejected. So I think there are some grey areas here as to why this has happened. And of course, I think one issue that tends to be submerged in one's assessment of the elections is the phenomenal violence that has gone on over the past months.
I was just going to come to that. I mean, that's the other aspect of the entire thing, isn't it? I mean, the violence. Look at the number of people that were killed on election day or polling day. There were several people who were killed, and violence continues, and it's still a problem there in Bangladesh.
In fact, this is one area where I think the government has not been very effective, at least before the elections. I do hope that now they will come down on violence with the full force of the law. I mean, you have petrol bombs being repeatedly thrown in crowded buses and so on. And mind you, all this is being done with the knowledge and the tacit support of the opposition. So there are many questions.
Could it also be state-inspired?
Yes, that is the charge of the opposition, of course, as they have charged the state with attacking the minorities to give the opposition a bad name. I wouldn't let that fly at all, frankly. I wouldn't let that fly at all.
Okay, let's talk about, we've got about a couple of minutes left, so let's quickly talk about India's role now. How do you see things panning out in Bangladesh affecting India really?
I think India and Bangladesh have had a very stable and from our perspective, a very productive relationship over the past few years. What would happen in the future, only the future would show. I am happy that India has taken the stand that it has, that the elections have been held under the four corners of the Constitution. India has earlier, when Foreign Secretary visited Dhaka, she had mentioned that the fullest possible participation should take place. So obviously, India is in no way advocating a one-party state or a one-party election, as has been charged by the media both here and there. So Bangladesh has been a friend, and I think our reaction before and after the elections has been as behoves a friend, with of course full commitment to the democratic process.
All right. That's all the time we have on this discussion. Thank you so much, Mr. Dev Mukherjee, for joining us on the show. Pleasure having you here on Rajya Sabha Television. Of course, let's shift focus now to the other big international story. National Basketball Association legend Dennis Rodman created a controversy by singing happy birthday to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in front of a large crowd in the capital Pyongyang. Now, Rodman is a former Chicago Bulls player. He was on his fourth North Korean visit to mark Kim's birthday with a basketball match on Wednesday. Rodman has been criticized for not using his influence with Kim to help free Kenneth Bae, an American missionary who has been jailed for alleged anti-state crimes. Rodman is also the highest profile American to have visited Kim. In December, Kim shocked the world by having his uncle executed after accusing him of many crimes. North Korea will hold elections for the country's stamp parliament in March. They will be the first such polls under Kim Jong-un's leadership and are set to further consolidate his power. Well, it's time for a short break now, but coming up next is the brave Pakistani boy who prevented a suicide bomber from blowing up his school. We'll be back in just a bit, to stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching World Panorama. Well, after enduring a deadly cold snap that continued for over a week, the United States is getting down to the job of estimating the economic costs of the Arctic chill. Thousands of flights were cancelled and millions of burst pipes had to be repaired from the Midwest to the Southeast. The cost estimated to be around $5 billion. The bone-chilling cold, snow and ice affected about 200 million people. Experts even feel that it has been the biggest economic disruption delivered by the weather since Superstorm Sandy in 2012, at least in terms of its sheer spread. Here's more.
United States getting a taste of sub-zero Martian temperatures. The Niagara Falls was totally frozen. Streets resemble skating rinks, while schools and government departments remain closed in many states. Across the country, the polar vortex spread the Arctic chill and record low temperatures. Air, road and rail travel were hopelessly snarled.
How are you staying warm in there?
Yes, I'm staying with 2 support on heater and I'm surviving. But that was not enough for this cold.
About half of the United States under a wind chilling warning. The Arctic cold air affected 140 million people in the northern and central parts of the United States. Temperatures plummeted to beyond life-threatening -51 degrees Celsius, creating challenges for people working outdoors.
We're working a lot, every day 12 hours, so it's really cold being all day outside. It's freezing. You know, you gotta dress warm, you know, put your hat, sweater on it, double pants, you know, good shoes, and you gotta deal with it.
The Mississippi River was frozen and even hammer knocks on the surface failed to penetrate it to fold it.
It's like a regular, like every day, no problem. I'm feeling good, I don't feeling cold too much, but it's okay. And I get in my van outside. Sometimes I take break and go outside, a little warm, a couple of minutes, I come back.
The Mississippi River has become a vast snowfield. So what is this? We can see the clean accumulated snow has reached 50 to 20 centimeters. If we move the snow and knock on the ice with a hammer, you will hear a very stiff sound. And no matter how hard I jumped on it, it is still safe and sound. I put these bananas out in the open air to freeze an hour ago. Now we first hear the sound, hard as 2 wood sticks. And it suddenly broke when I knocked it. You will find it very solid. This is cameraman's t-shirt and it has been frozen in less than an hour. You can hear it sounds like a piece of stiff paper. And I can fold it any way I like and smash it, but it never changed its shape.
Meteorologists say the polar vortex is caused by 2 year-round cyclones of ultra-cold air. These winds deposit warm air over places like Alaska and Greenland that in turn push freezing Arctic air further south.
Well, a 14-year-old boy is being hailed as a hero in Pakistan for tackling a suicide bomber and saving his schoolmates. 9th standard student Etizaz Hassan Bangash and his friends spotted a man wearing a suicide vest in the Hangu area. Refusing to heed to the pleas of his fellow students, Etizaz confronted the bomber who detonated his vest. Now, in another incident, of course, the Taliban also killed a senior officer and 3 associates in Aslam, and this person was posted in the area, and he had been instrumental in busting several militants. On Thursday, Aslam's team killed 3 suspected militants in an encounter in the Mangopir area. Well, the South Sudanese army was engaged in a desperate fight to free rebel-held centers in key areas. As fighting continued to rage across South Sudan, the International Crisis Group estimated that the death toll in the conflict was around 10,000. US-backed efforts to declare a ceasefire have not yielded any results. The fighting started in a military barrack in Juba on December 15th. President Salva Kiir says that there was an attempt of a coup in the area led by his former Vice President Riek Machar. The issue of whether there was a coup plot has been a significant stumbling block in the peace negotiations to end the conflict. Even the US has challenged the version of the coup put forward by the South Sudanese government. Let's now take a look at some other equally important news events from across the globe in our special segment, Globe Watch.
Anti-government protesters gathered in Bangkok, blockading major roads to prevent the government from functioning. The march was an attempt to drum up support to bring the capital to a halt next week ahead of the 2nd February election called by caretaker Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra. The protesters are aware that Shinawatra would probably win on the back of support in the rural north and northeast. Her rivals want her to be replaced by an appointed People's Council to push through electoral reforms. Shinawatra is accused of being a puppet of her self-exiled brother and former Premier Thaksin Shinawatra. Turkey is riding a wave of political turbulence triggered by a tussle between its government and the judiciary. Many high-profile people were arrested on corruption charges. The people who were rounded up included sons of 3 cabinet ministers and the head of a public bank. Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan denounced the operation. He also removed over 100 senior police officers from duty. Erdogan accused the justice system of conspiring to undermine the country. The scandal brought citizens into the streets 6 months after major demonstrations defying the government. Observers say it hurts the Prime Minister's chances of standing as a presidential candidate later this year. Venezuelans by the thousands are outraged by the killing of former Miss Venezuela Monica Spare and her ex-husband by roadside bandits on 7 January. The high-profile violent crime has shaken the conscience in the South American nation. The soap opera actress and her former husband Henry Berry died while vacationing in Venezuela. The pair's 5-year-old daughter survived the attack with a bullet wound in her leg. The incident led to massive protests against the rampant wave of violence.
Well, French investigators have ruled out faulty skis and excessive speed as the possible causes for Schumacher's life-threatening fall. The Formula One legend had skied off just before the accident on December 29th. The 7-time world champion has been in a medically induced coma since he fell between 2 regular slopes in the ski resort of Meribel and slammed his head on a rock. Investigators are seeking to determine why the accident took place and whether anyone is at fault. Investigators reported that his skis were not the cause of the accident, ending speculation that a safety release on Schumacher's skis didn't operate properly. Well, it's time now for all the very latest news from the world of movies, music and lifestyle. Here's the entertainment wrap.
Gravity topped the films nominated for the BAFTAs, Britain's top film honours. The space thriller earned 11 nods, including Best Actress for Sandra Bullock and Best Director for Alfonso Cuarón. The movie was nominated in the Best Film and Best British Film categories, since much of the movie's scenes and its special effects were all done in the UK. Gravity will try to best 12 Years a Slave and American Hustle, each received 10 BAFTA nods. Frozen has not only conquered the box office, but the music charts as well. Its soundtrack reached #1 on the Billboard 200 chart, only the 4th animated film soundtrack to do so in the chart's 58-year history. The album sold 165,000 copies, bumping Beyoncé's self-titled album down to #2. Auction house Sotheby's brought works by prominent artists like Van Gogh and Matisse to Hong Kong in the first stop of its global preview of its London evening sale. The preview, which began on January 6th, showcased 18 highlights from its Impressionist and Modern Art auction to be held in London on February 5th and 6th. The London's Menwear Fashion Week could not be complete without a Burberry show taking place next to London's iconic Robert Albert Hall and Albert Memorial. The Menswear Fashion Week came about because of a steep rise in profits from Britain's menswear brands and sees more than 130 men's labels showcase their latest collections to fashion buyers and media from more than 20 countries.
Well, that's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. We'll see you again same time next week with more international news. But don't forget, you can always log on to our Facebook and Twitter pages and spread the word as well. Thank you so much for watching.